Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Koleno, and before we begin, I want to note that these are confidential remarks intended solely for this audience. Today, we're going to examine a distinction that most consumers never realize they're making. Many people believe they're choosing between competing professionals who offer similar value. In reality, they're often choosing between two completely different operating philosophies. One philosophy depends on controlling information. The other depends on revealing it. One creates dependency. The other creates clarity. The purpose of this discussion is not to identify specific individuals or industries. Instead, it's to provide a practical framework that helps us evaluate whether a professional is acting as a gatekeeper or as a true advisor. By the end of this presentation, you'll have a set of diagnostic questions that can be applied to almost any professional relationship. Most consumers believe the decision comes down to choosing between one professional and another. They compare personalities, they compare branding, they compare years of experience, they compare marketing messages. But that's rarely the real choice. The actual decision is much deeper. What you're truly selecting is the decision-making environment you want to operate within. Will information be controlled or shared? Will questions be welcomed or discouraged? Will transparency be treated as a strength or as a threat? The individual matters, but the philosophy matters far more. Because philosophies determine behavior long after the sales conversation is over. At the heart of this framework are two fundamentally different approaches. The first is information control. Information control requires uncertainty. When information is restricted, filtered, or selectively disclosed, the professional maintains influence because the client lacks visibility. The second approach is absolute transparency. Transparency accepts accountability. It assumes that informed clients can make intelligent decisions. It welcomes scrutiny because there is nothing to hide. When evaluating any professional relationship, the question is simple. Are they helping you see more clearly, or are they benefiting from your inability to see clearly? That distinction changes everything. The first diagnostic question is remarkably simple. Ask them how they get paid. A gatekeeper often avoids specifics. The answer becomes vague. The subject changes. The conversation shifts toward perceived value rather than actual compensation. An advisor takes the opposite approach. An advisor explains exactly how compensation works. The numbers are clear. The incentives are disclosed. Questions are encouraged. Transparency about compensation is important because incentives drive behavior. If someone is uncomfortable explaining how they're paid, that discomfort may be more informative than the answer itself. The second question is equally powerful. Ask yourself what information is difficult to obtain. Gatekeepers often rely on hidden elements, hidden incentives, hidden trade-offs, hidden conflicts. The less visibility you have, the easier it becomes to shape your decisions. Advisors move in the opposite direction. They disclose information. They provide documentation. They encourage comparison. They understand that transparency creates trust more effectively than persuasion ever can. A professional should never fear an informed client. A critical test of integrity is whether alternatives are openly discussed. Gatekeepers often present a single path. Alternative choices may be framed as dangerous, inferior, or unrealistic. The goal is to narrow perceived options. Advisors expand options. They explain different service levels, different costs, different benefits, different trade-offs. Most importantly, they allow you to choose. A trustworthy advisor understands that empowerment creates stronger relationships than restriction ever will. This question often reveals more than any other. Ask what happens if you decide not to move forward. A gatekeeper frequently creates friction, pressure, dependency, fear of making the wrong choice. The objective is to increase the cost of leaving. An advisor behaves differently. They make the process understandable. They respect your ability to decide. They acknowledge that informed consumers may choose another path. Confidence does not require pressure. In fact, the strongest professionals are often the least threatened by your freedom to choose. Next, ask how success will be measured. Gatekeepers frequently rely on vague language. Trust me, I'm experienced. I've been doing this for years. While experience matters, experience alone is not a measurement system. Advisors define success before decisions are made. They establish criteria. They identify measurable outcomes. They create standards that can later be verified. If success cannot be objectively measured, accountability becomes difficult. And without accountability, performance becomes largely a matter of opinion. The final diagnostic question is about accountability. Who controls the scorecard? A gatekeeper often controls the narrative and the measurement system. In effect, they become the referee in their own game. An advisor accepts independent standards. The rules are visible. The measurements are visible. The results are visible. True accountability occurs when success can be evaluated without relying on the professional's own interpretation. That is the difference between claiming credibility and demonstrating it. At this point, the pattern should be clear. Across every category, the distinction remains remarkably consistent. Gatekeepers avoid specifics. Advisors maintain open ledgers. Gatekeepers rely on hidden conflicts. Advisors disclose information. Gatekeepers manufacture risk around alternatives. Advisors explain trade-offs. Gatekeepers create friction when clients leave. Advisors facilitate transitions. Gatekeepers ask for trust. Advisors provide measurable outcomes. Gatekeepers define their own standards. Advisors accept public accountability. Different industries may look different on the surface, but these underlying behaviors tend to remain the same. If there is one principle to remember from today's discussion, it is this: a gatekeeper will never willingly allow themselves to be measured. Measurement introduces accountability. Accountability introduces transparency. Transparency removes the need for dependency. Whenever someone resists objective evaluation, independent verification, or clearly defined standards, pay close attention. Resistance to measurement often reveals more than any marketing message ever could. Pause and ask why. Let's compare the two systems side by side. The gatekeeper hides criteria, keeps standards vague, creates uncertainty, and ultimately traps the client within that uncertainty. The advisor does the opposite. The advisor provides the standards in advance, discloses earnings and incentives, submits to public accountability, and empowers the client. The contrast is not subtle. One system benefits from confusion. The other benefits from clarity. One seeks control. The other seeks informed decision-making. I'll leave you with a final thought. Trust is important, but trust should never replace verification. A gatekeeper asks for trust because trust cannot easily be measured. An advisor welcomes verification because verification strengthens trust. The strongest professional relationships are not built on blind confidence. They are built on transparency, accountability, measurable standards, and informed decisions. When evaluating any professional service, remember this simple distinction. A gatekeeper asks for trust. An advisor submits to verification. Thank you for your time. This has been Confidential Remarks.